Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comrades, compañeros, welcome back to the Moynihan Report. Coming to you Friday, not Thursday this time. A little change in the schedule, but I did get to see the Melania movie. I think the first showing in New York this morning at 10 a.m. My reaction, about a minute of it, will be over at the Fifth Column's Instagram feed. But what a movie. I haven't seen it. It's like a Stanley Donen classic, but don't watch it. It's long and tedious, and more on this in a bit. But today, this just happened, by the way. I want to say this is brilliant planning, but when we have Colby Hall from Mediaite on, who you've seen on the show before, I don't even know what his title is. It the Poobah, the King, the editor in
Dominant
Waiting?
Primordial Beast.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
From Mediaite, Colby, welcome back.
Great to be here. Thanks for having
Good
me.
day for it, because
Crazy day.
Don Lemon has been sent to Gitmo or something. Let's go over that. Don Lemon, everyone knows,
Right.
Former CNN host, now doing his independent thing, live streaming. You've probably seen him walking around New York City, as have I,
Right.
like with his lav mic pointing at people's faces, is in Minneapolis about 2 weeks ago, and goes in with a procession of people that are protesting a church because the pastor of this church is apparently, and apparently this is true, has some affiliation with ICE. I don't want to
Regional ICE field leader.
Okay, regional ICE field leader. They go into the church, and Don Lemon is there. He says, as a journalist, the government says, no, we're going to arrest people. It goes to a magistrate in Minneapolis. They refuse to sign this. It is then appealed to a judge who was a clerk for Scalia.
Two-time clerk.
Two-time clerk, and I think a mentor to Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
George W. Bush, rock rib kind of conservative guy, a Catholic, and says, no, you got nothing here. So throws it out. Then a grand jury, and interestingly, a grand jury in Minnesota, indicts him. And he gets arrested last night in L.A.
He's out there to cover the Grammys.
Covering the Grammys. And you can start with the caveat, you're friends with Don Lemon.
Yeah. So when I first saw this news, I was really sickened by it for a variety of reasons, not least of which, I just had dinner with him last week, and I've been on his show a bunch of times. He was not naive enough to think that something like this wasn't coming. I mean, he was hoping that it wasn't. I was largely sickened by the fact that, if you watch the whole, I didn't watch all 6 hours, but he did a 6-hour live stream, and there was only a small part of it. And in that, he sort of reveals that he kind of knew that they were going to this church. It's not clear that he knew that they were going to go in the church. He did go in the church, though when he is in the church, he does journalism. He interviews protesters, and he interviews parishioners and pastors candidly in a mostly respectful, journalistically sound way, right? So, it raises a ton of questions, not least of which, what is journalism?
Yes.
And I believe that he was doing good journalism,
And
because there was
too,
real news that was going on there, and he wasn't just being an opinion talk show host, although he did let his opinions come out a little bit. I'm shocked that they found a grand jury in Minneapolis, of all places, in this context, that found that. And, Pam Bondi put out on social media that she directed the arrest of him, which is sort of weird optics. And there's lots of questions. Did the grand jury, were they made aware how this whole thing was adjudicated? Were they aware that the magistrate and the circuit judge said, yeah, there's no there there. This is not the fact. So, but the biggest issue, the biggest problem is that this is a real chilling effect. And this is straight up, this is the playbook of Erdogan and Putin. I'm not going to say that journalists are going to be suddenly falling out of windows, but I don't think it takes much imagination to say that if, that Don Lemon is a vocal critic and has been a vocal critic of Trump's for some time, this is a chance for retribution and to send a message to any other critic like, watch your step. And that really undermines the First Amendment and freedom of the press, because that exists so that we can speak truth to power.
Let's start with a very broad agreement here. I mean, I think that if it's Nick Shirley, this illiterate child who is pretending to be a journalist, if he goes into, I don't know, a mosque in Dearborn,
right,
or these anti-Semites that have been going, very specifically anti-Semitic too, by the way, going to find Hasidic people who have been doing what's been supposedly happening in Minneapolis amongst the Somali community if they go into a house of worship, if they do that in a mosque, if they do that in a temple, and it's Nick Shirley. I don't think this happens, right? I mean, this is because of the politics of the situation. It's because of the person who is involved, Don Lemon, who they don't like. Let's play a counterfactual here in the sense that if we find out that there is information in that indictment, and this is their argument here, I'm just making their argument, that he was involved in the planning of this, was instrumental in it, and was a part of this group in some way, does that change it for you from a journalistic sense that this is not necessarily an attack on journalists as such? He might be an enemy of Donald Trump and vice versa, but he did do something wrong in this sense that was worthy of arrest if all things were equal.
I think that adds a layer to it that certainly is a variable. I skimmed the indictment as I came over on the subway, so I'm not fluent with it.
Yeah.
What I seem to recall that they used as evidence was him saying, let's not reveal, let's not say where we're going. So it doesn't appear that he was necessarily a part of the planning, but it raises the question that he was aware of they were going to go to this church.
And at one point during, I don't know if this is in the indictment, but I watched as much of the stream as I could after the fact. He instructs his camera person to turn a camera off because they're talking about planning.
Right. So I guess it begs the question, if he's aware that they're going to go to this church and he joins them to cover that, does that make him sort of an accomplice? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who are saying like, well, if you know that someone's going to rob a bank and you go with them to watch the rob a bank, I think that's sort of a false comparison because I don't think we're talking about bank robberies here. Look, I think it's fair to say, the Nick Shirley going to mosque thing makes a great point. I think it's fair to say that poor judgment was used by entering a house of worship. I think that you do need to respect the house of worship. Mm-hmm. And I think that criticism mostly goes towards the protesters. I think what makes Don sort of uniquely different is very specifically how he handled himself and how he spoke to the people there to capture and document what turned out to be a very newsworthy event. And he did it in a way that was shockingly journalistically sound, right? Mm-hmm. He did it in a way that sort of made the argument from both sides and asked for thoughts on both sides. If it comes out that he was sort of plotted, I don't think that was the case. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's denied it. Anything is possible. But if he was plotting it, that would certainly change the dynamic. I don't think that will come up. But I think you make the great point. If it were Nick Shirley going into a mosque, or they're using this thing called FACE, right? And I'm not a lawyer. That was basically used to sort of stop protesters from going into abortion clinics, right?
Yeah. It was the even-handed version. You can't go into an abortion clinic, and there's like the 25-foot rule or something, or a house of worship. And it almost reminds me of in France when they were banning the headscarf in school. They said a kippah too, like throw it in, and put North Korea in the axis of evil. But either way, it's against the law.
Right.
And my friends over at FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, are very consistent on these cases. They've argued, they've sued the Trump administration a number of times. They have defended Palestinian students who have gotten in trouble and their visas revoked for speech. They, after this, nothing to do with Don Lemon, said, guys, this isn't free speech. This is a very, very different thing. Here is the precedent. You're going into a house of worship. And I think that's where Don Lemon was wrong as a journalist, going in and saying, hey, this is the First Amendment. And he says this to camera and to somebody else. No, that's not it. The First Amendment doesn't allow you to go into a private house of worship, disrupt their ceremony. That's something very, very different. You do that outside, on the sidewalk. But him being wrong about that is not something that should end you in handcuffs.
Well, no, I think there's room to say that he, made a questionable decision or bad decision. I think also there's unequal application of that law by the Trump administration because they have pardoned and do not pursue people that sort of break the FACE law surrounding the abortion clinics. So it's one of these things that like, so this is the rule of law. We're going to pardon those who broke it with abortion clinics, but we're going to suddenly use this and go after people who are openly critical of us and anti-ICE and anti sort of immigration removal. And the front man is a black man named Don Lemon, who has become a super vocal and increasingly powerful critic of the Trump administration. His influence is stronger, and it doesn't take much to find a bigger picture that the Trump administration, especially following the invasion of the Washington Post reporter and taking of her laptop, the threats of lawsuits against ABC, CBS, I mean, the list goes on and on. The AP being kept out of access because
there's so much of it that people have forgotten that Donald Trump threatened to sue the New York Times because of a bad Times Siena poll that showed him underwater in almost every issue.
It's absurd. Yeah. It's bizarre. Yeah. And what I would say is that to all of my friends, and I have a lot of good friends in Kansas with whom I debate civilly on text, this is less about Democrats versus Republicans or Trump or anti-Trump. This is about an erosion of a precedent that is sort of anti-constitutional. And be careful, because if this is the new way that we're doing things, that will eventually, the pendulum will swing the other way and you'll be on the wrong side of that. So that's the issue that I think people are missing.
I think there's an interesting parallel here, and one that I haven't seen people talk about, but I went digging into the January 6th stuff. And this is a really interesting one that might come back to bite people who have been criticizing the Trump administration on this. A guy named Steve Baker.
I looked this up.
Do you know this?
Yeah, no, I wrote about it. Yeah.
So Steve Baker was a journalist for Blaze
Still
News.
Is, yeah.
Still is, which is Glenn Beck's thing. Went into the Capitol on January 6th, was indicted, arrested, I think about 3 years later, and then was about to be sentenced. The judge was very rough on him. Nothing happened because Donald Trump pardoned him. That's how long this process took.
Right.
But Steve Baker didn't break anything, didn't steal anything, didn't punch anyone, but was accused by the government of being a supporter of it because he very clearly, after the fact, gave an interview to somebody and said, I 100% support these people. And there is a question there.
No,
His lawyer, of course, says, this is a speech issue. He was intimidating cops, was another one of the charges, in which he said to one of the cops, what, are you going to shoot me with that gun? Something like that,
right.
Which again is a speech issue. So the question then becomes, is there a special category for opinion journalism that I am a supporter of this and I am documenting it and I'm going inside? In that case is a very interesting one because it seems to be the closest parallel to Don Lemon and somebody that nobody gave a shit about.
Right.
In a kind of inverse of the Nick Shirley thing is that a conservative journalist who did this was arrested and then about to go to jail probably, who I never heard of. And I pay attention to this stuff. You're in Mediaite, you pay attention. If I said that name the day before this church invasion, or whatever you want to call it, happened, you'd probably be like, kind of a
I'd be like,
name.
oh, no, I would say he was the guy that broke the big Blaze story that they found out who the pipe bomber was during.
Oh, is that the guy that wrote that?
Same guy.
Yeah, well, we're going to get that woman. we'll get her soon
Turns
enough.
out that was a big embarrassment. But I
again,
would say,
there's no special First Amendment thing about good journalism.
Or being bad, right.
Yeah.
I think to be intellectually consistent, one needs to, if you're going to defend Don Lemon in this instance, you also have to defend Steve Baker in this because they're more similar than they are wrong. And I think...
But the people would have a point if they said, well, where the fuck were you during this?
Right.
Why didn't you care about journalism during this? Just because this guy wasn't on CNN?
Well, I think there's a fair argument to be made that he was one of 1,500 J6 invaders, and his story sort of got lost. And I would say that the Blaze probably did him no favors by, they were probably like, we don't want to promote that one of our journalists was invading the Capitol. So they probably didn't use him as a cause celeb because, and also that there was,
Beck interviewed him, and I listened to it before I came over here, in which he did raise this as a First Amendment issue. The government's lawyers had all sorts of very complicated arguments of why this speech translated into a fig leaf for being a part of the invasion force
right.
when you're using journalism as an excuse. But when you really dig down to it, it doesn't make a ton of sense. And it seems as if that guy's views were the things that didn't protect him.
Right.
And if Don Lemon is in there saying, you know, this guy's a nice guy, he's a bad guy, or this is First Amendment speech, or turn the cameras off, or he made a big mistake. And I understand that this can be, I'm trying to give him as much credit as I can. I'm not a big fan of his as a journalist, but he said, you know, we are going to go in and this was a clip that was going around on social media. And I can understand that there's a group of us, yes, we are going in, but it does make it sound as if an aggressive prosecutor, in the way that the January 6th prosecutors were extremely aggressive, by the way, and you go back and look at it. And on the day of that event, on my show, I said every person who entered that building should go to jail. Right. I have no sympathy for any of them. Yep. And I think some of them should have remained in jail, and some of them were overcharged, like wildly overcharged in a political way. Yeah. You know, so is there some hypocrisy in the fact that journalistic groups should be paying attention, right? But do they not? They want to touch the blaze with tongs, right? Because they're not good journalists. But you got to protect all the speech.
There's so many layers here. If the question is there a double standard here? Yes, but I think the context of these two things is relevant. And I hate to say this because this is death for this sort of video interview. It all turns to Derrida and semiotics. Like it all turns into...
That's the death of every conversation
I've
ever
is.
had.
I know it is, but it's sort of in a world where it's all subjective and journalism is based on objectivity and facts, and we can't agree on, we don't have a shared reality anymore. We don't have shared facts. So what are journalistic standards at a time when everything is sort of, analysis? And, but I do think it's a fascinating, the Steve Baker sort of concept in comparison to Don is exactly right. You know, if Don were the only sort of person or journalist that was sort of under attack by this administration, I would feel a lot differently about this whole thing. But there's clear dots that form a line and a pattern that suggest this administration holds the First Amendment in like the lowest esteem, because all that really matters is what it seems to me. This is my opinion. Trump is directing his, secretaries to do his bidding, and they care more about staying in touch and in power with Trump and doing his bidding over doing anything that's principled. Yeah, and that's summing it up. But I think it's right. I think it's right that there's a shameful. I think that people should feel a sense of shame that they don't care about the journalists who don't align with their worldview, or they think are lesser than, because they don't go to Columbia J School or they work for the Blaze or something. But it is also important contextually to say that this is part of a very, very, very large pattern. Right. I mean, people have made the counter argument to me that, the Twitter files and during COVID and they're squeezing these people. There is an instinct always in power to control journalism. Yeah. And is there a way that we can appreciate it the way that Donald Trump does it? Because it's so naked and so brazen and so clearly corrupt and out there. I mean, and effective. And effective, yeah. I mean, look at it at a corporate level, who are not sort of committed. I saw the Melania Trump documentary today. I think I understand the corruption of this $75 million for that unbelievable piece of shit. CBS News paid, or whatever, Viacom paid $16 million for a bullshit lawsuit that was paper thin because it was a business decision. ABC News spent $16 million because of something George Stephanopoulos said that would never have been held up in court. But they made that decision because it was a business decision. They're not doing this because they want to support the journalists. They're doing this because, and that sets a tone for the Trump administration to say, like, look, I'm going to sue the IRS for $10 billion. And guess what? The guy who runs the IRS is someone who reports to me. We'll settle for $1 billion. Like, it literally, it's so bizarre and crazy. And it's normal, though, in the sense that this kind of thing happens on smaller scales. In back rooms, smoke-filled back rooms. This is the brazenness of the Trump administration. They do this out in the open, but there's a lot of people who say, I'm not necessarily one of them, I'm just putting this to you, to hear what your thoughts on it are. But
a lot of people just say the corruption of this business. There is an industry of journalism is corrupt books, and they didn't start last year. And what kind of corruption is that? Whether it's advertising, it's like, oh, don't touch them, they're our advertiser. It is a level, 10 levels different when it's the most powerful person in the world, the president of the United States. But there's always this kind of double dealing with journalists and sources and politicians. And again, that's why I say that the nakedness I almost appreciate.
Well,
it's
funny.
I think it's disgusting on every level, and I've talked about it. I talked about it on election night. I said, you free speech people that I'm sitting across from, who say that you're interested in free speech, and the man just sued CBS because of an interview that he wasn't involved in an edit that is totally common.
I'm reminded of many arguments that I used to have with really smart friends in the early 90s about racism in the South versus the North. The argument is that the South is more openly racist, but is more open and transparent, so that it's clearer and less pernicious than the deep-seated pretend Northern. And so the argument then is that, like, if you're more brazen and more open, and it's sort of, where you stand, somehow it's less sort of.
Well, it's easier to fight, too, right? But I mean, in the Trump case, it's easier to fight. People are talking about this, where you need a journalism core to kind of unravel so much of the other stuff. I mean, it took, and I think there's a lot of this was very overstated, but, the Twitter stuff was Matt Taibbi in concert with a billionaire who happened to buy the outlet, so they get the access to the information. That was nobody leaking it. So it's much more difficult to get that sort of information. So I only say this, and I say it partially in jest, but I only say it to say, like, we know what they're doing. And it makes it easier to mobilize against it.
Well, that's absolutely right. And so I will take issue with something you said earlier, that when you say that this is all normal, yes, in a theoretical sort of like, this is, our primal instinct to follow our will to power.
Yeah.
What is not normal is the exponential scale at play in this administration. And I mean, not just with journalism, but with, what appears to be evidence of deep, he's made, $1.4 billion in his first year in office with all this crypto stuff, like that, we're just throwing away emoluments, right? And so,
I mean, the movie that I saw today, how much did she get
75
for licensing certain things? I mean, the structure of it is weird, but she didn't come away from this empty-handed. Only the theaters will come away empty-handed.
Well, Jeff Bezos is basically ignoring Washington Post, which is collapsing under our eyes right now, while he's at haute couture fashion shows in Paris, and basically signing off on $75 million paychecks to, what was it, $40 million for this movie and
marketing.
And for marketing of this movie.
It's going to be the Jeb Bush campaign, the dollar to response ratio.
Oh, it's going to be. What was it, Giuliani? Or no, was it Bloomberg? It was Giuliani that paid $55 million for one delegate.
Yeah,
when he ran
in
96 or something.
Yeah, in the Marshall Islands.
Yeah. And I understand that movie is really thoughtful and smart, and you learned a lot.
I learned so much. I literally walked out, the first thing I said to my producer is, I said, I think I know less about her now than when I went in, because at least I thought I knew things about her.
Yeah.
And there's not a human in it. There's not a human at all in it. I mean, there's no relationship. There's no relationship between Trump and her. There's no electricity, no story. There's a couple of interesting characters, and they're her designers, which are
afraid I have to see it because it's like my job.
Yeah.
And but do I eat a gummy and sort of about how weird it is?
Literally said the same thing this morning.
Because I just think it's going to be the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
It is.
And maybe it would be more interesting if I was sort of
but there was one great thing in the movies where she's walking through, I think, the Capitol building or something, and she says, I'm walking to the crypt. And I was like, what did she just say? And she was saying crypt. So I just love her accent. She's like triumph through the whole time. So that's really entertaining. And I got to say, she looks very hot.
Yeah.
It was very Trump of me. She looks very hot.
She is pretty.
And that's the Trump thing, by the way. He's so terrible that we refuse to acknowledge that we have a very hot first lady. Nobody talks about it.
But I mean,
Colby, nobody talks about it.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. I mean, it's like you don't talk about the 70-year. It's like the guy from Modern Family who has the hot Colombian wife. Like, it's just the weird sort of trope of the older rich guy that suddenly is nailing a hot model. Like
We don't use those words here.
No, we don't.
Yeah. Fornicating is the word we use on the show.
Yeah. So sorry to get off on
But
that.
that emoluments thing, it is like the crypto stuff. The fact that nobody cares about that is insane. And it kind of de-incentivizes journalism about this stuff, because why bother?
Well,
so in one sense, when I say it's out in the open, it is the Steve Bannon fire hose of bullshit, where there's such a volume of it that what is it even worth reporting on?
Well, it's not. I mean, I had the thought experiment. And I ended up spending like 3 weeks on this. It was like the fire hose of conflict and scandal of 2025, and I think it's clearly intentional by the Trump administration to So all these Epstein files came out today, and guess what? All journalists were freaking out about this Don Lemon thing.
Yeah.
And the Epstein files dropped the day after the big Melania preview at Trump Kennedy Center.
A Friday drop, we all know in journalism.
Exactly right. So it's all about creating scandal, conflict, controversy that shifts the narrative, that it not only is impossible to follow, but it's numb.
Are they good at it, Colby, in the sense that they know how to parcel these things out? Or is it just that they've discovered what a lot of us have discovered, that a lot of people just don't give a shit? Fact checking, remember when we were going to do the Pinocchios?
Yeah.
And that was going to really stem the tide of Trump's lies. And then we realized no one cares whether it's true or not, which makes journalism kind of hard.
I think the Democrats so often get these things wrong because they are playing by a different set of rules that have long gone. To your question, I think Trump is very good at exploiting what you just said. The short attention span, this numbness, people don't care. Looking back, Trump was selling Teslas on the South Lawn of the White House, and we have forgotten about that. He suggested building sort of a, Trump resort on Gaza that Palestine, there's a long list of batshit crazy things that he had said that we were like, oh, right, remember that? It's like, I used to produce a show called Best Week Ever on VH1 that sort of mocked the idea of short attention span. And we just keep, we'll, remember Alex Preddy. We're already moved on from his death, which just happened this weekend, because we're talking about, we haven't really moved on, but obviously we're distracted by Don Lemon's arrest and the Epstein file.
But on that, the Alex Preddy thing, which is pretty interesting in the sense that it does show that there are traditional political instincts that still exist in the Trump administration. That, I know there's a lot of people that don't want to believe that it was a climb down by Donald Trump, including people like Bill O'Reilly, who I think I saw in Mediaite screaming about, "There's not a climb down, what's wrong with you?" But the Tom Homan thing is a big deal. That's a big switch.
It was as close as you'll ever see this administration admit defeat.
And it seems like they did, in the sense that those officers were just relocated. Now it's been said that they're being investigated and they're taken off
by the
duty.
DOJ.
By the DOJ.
Yeah, which is a huge thing.
It's a huge thing. We think under Pam Bondi, there's no independence here. And there are a couple of things, it seems to me, two things in particular, that constrain Donald Trump. It's not his party, because his party is full of scared, weak people who are worried about being primaried. It is the markets, which is very important to him. Bond markets will make him do a double take about the tariffs again. Oh, maybe he shouldn't do that. And poll numbers, right? The polls went down on this. This was his signature issue.
Well, they were getting killed. And I think there's one other thing is his prime motivator is staying out of prison or keeping himself from getting impeached. And he knows right now, if the midterms were today, the GOP would get slaughtered. I think a lot of people that are close to him, even like Ted Cruz said this in the leaked tape, that, the thing that helped him get elected, the economy and the immigration, economy's no better. It's not necessarily worse, but it's not any better. Tax returns may change that. But immigration and the way that they're dealing with the stuff in Minneapolis has turned this from a win to he's 16 points underwater, I think, on that. And so I think he pivoted because I think there was enough people in Congress that he listens to say dude, this is polling so poorly that if we don't change this now, we're going to lose the House and the Senate, and
and you're going to get impeached.
Yeah,
immediately.
And that's that's.
And you have with impeachment too, which I highly advise Democrats against. For
I
a variety
kind of
of reasons.
agree. Yeah,
but the Ukraine call, bad call, not the best call.
No,
the best call ever. It was a perfect call. Not a good call, but compared to what you have now, in the ammunition shed, if you're going to go for impeachment, that's nothing.
Right.
I mean, you have stuff that's much more significant than that, and I think that there'll probably be more stuff coming out, but a little bit of success. The genius of Donald Trump is not very genius sometimes. It was the success of Venezuela that made him go towards Greenland. In that Greenland thing, I can't stop winning. And the Greenland thing was such an epic disaster for him and for like far right parties in Europe who were his allies saying, Nigel Farage saying, like, what are you doing, man? Like, you kidding me? And that's a failure. This becomes a failure. These cascading failures. The man has an attention span of a gnat. So he's on, I won, so let's just go forward.
What do you think about disinhibition? I wrote about this. And I have a couple of friends who pointed this out, who have older parents who have said, and I'm cautious about this, even though I'm bringing it up. The earliest stage of sort of, sundowning or dementia is disinhibition, where you lose your filter and you just say whatever. Preservation, saying the same thing over and over and over again. You see in public. And, I'm loath to say, especially following Biden's like clear decline, that was totally sort of like, hey, let's pretend he's not, which honestly draw a direct line to that, to what's going on in Minneapolis. But sometimes I wonder, given his power structure with his secretaries, that if he's just sort of like literally, to your point, following his will to power, it's like, you know what, let's just go get Greenland. Let's just do it. Yeah. Is that part of like, is he sort of losing it a little bit?
I don't think so, actually. I mean, it would be different. I mean, Biden, the interesting thing about it is all you have to do is go, particularly if you're hated Biden and you want to go back to like the Clarence Thomas hearings, the Anita Hill questioning, which I talked about Trump before. Go back to that and you're like, this guy
sharp
as a tack.
Although he would say dumb things, but he was sharp.
Yeah, he was sharp, but he was that was like the Bidenisms, like, look at all the Indians own Dunkin' Donuts. Like, Joe. There was the Joe.
We call them the colored kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then Skillet comes up and it's like, dude, stop. But this kind of stuff is different because you've had Trump being this person for so long, doing these totally insane things for so long, whether it's in the 1980s, calling the New York Post as what was it, John Barron. John Barron is like, his middle name and his son's name. And nobody will figure that one out,
Who
Donald.
Who's that?
But that kind of stuff, this pattern has happened for a very long time with him. But I suspect the thing is that all of this is pinned to legacy.
Yeah.
Why do people want prizes? Why did he text the Norwegian prime minister and say, I want Greenland because I didn't get the Nobel Prize? That's deranged.
Yeah.
FIFA knows how to get close to him by creating a prize for him.
They're not a corrupt organization.
No, not at all. No, nobody's ever been to jail either. But all of this stuff of prizes, which he blatantly says, and he says to the New York Times editorial board, like, they're like, why do you want to do this? And he says basically, for me.
Right.
It's important for me.
Right.
And for my reputation. Like, it's not America. It's not China and Russia cruising around the Arctic. It's about him. His time's running out.
Right.
And the problem with journalists is they never fucking remember that. They never remember the actuarial table, the guy that eats 15 Big Macs a day. They're like, he's going to go for a third term. It's like, will he survive?
Right.
Just physically. I don't mean the assassin's bullet or something terrible like that.
Yeah.
I mean that the man's old.
Yeah.
And he is trying to establish the legacy. And that even includes putting his name on the side of the Kennedy Center before. No one will do it, so I'll do it now and then try getting it removed.
Right.
Do it and say sorry later kind of thing. But that just seems to me that he is doing what he wants and always has wanted to do, which is the closest you can get to some sort of Monroe doctrine, which I don't believe to be just a Monroe doctrine. I believe that there's a doctrine in his head, that is like, this is the way the world should remember me, and I'm going to do as much as I can in a short period
I think that's astute. I think that's exactly right. And I will say also, something that gets lost in all of this is that the framers of the Constitution sort of just assumed that there was some sort of like social construct, or this like sort of, even if it was noblesse oblige, this obligation to do the right thing for the larger amount of people. Yeah. They never considered that someone would get into the office and sort of abide by what you just said. Is like, I just kind of want to take care of me and my memory. Yeah. And I just, he's a guy that came from the mean streets of New York City with, $3 million of his dad's money, but was sort of created like, just promote yourself, just get what you can. And he's, been very, very successful, but also been very comfortable in constant chaos. He's a guy that, like, if I were in a third of the, problems that he were in, I would like melt down from anxiety, but he thrives and seems to be okay. Like, oh, it'll all work out. Like, oh, they're going to indict me. Oh, they found me, we'll win the election and we'll all go away. And he's been right. I'm not saying that he's been right on principles, but he's been right to say, like, I'll survive, I'll get through this, and when I get there, I'm gonna put my name on the Kennedy Center, which again is like straight, like the fact that we just are like, oh yeah, he did that thing, like that's bonkers,
that's
crazy
craziness.
That is like, and the fact that like you ask, Marco Rubio or a Republican senator in the Capitol, like, oh, I didn't see that. Did that happen? I haven't heard about that. Like, that's like they're the least informed Republican members of Congress ever, because you ask them about anything that Trump has done. It's like, I'm not read up on that. I haven't seen that. Like, come on, dude.
Every time. I mean, but I think you probably have the same disposition as me in the sense that if you sold a company for $1 billion, you would stop working, I presume, write a book, go to a beach, buy a big house somewhere. The number of people that I've known over the years or interviewed over the years who sell the thing for $1 billion and then buy 5 more companies and get right back into it, they need that constant. Right. There's something, when people say Donald Trump is a businessman, they always mean that he can make great deals, which he makes a lot of very, very bad deals. But the instinct of it, the kind of how he was forged, you see that in every aspect of these diplomats in Brussels who come up through this stodgy, boring European system of becoming a Brussels diplomat, which is a very particular type of person. And you see them all there wide-eyed at Davos because he's just like the archetype of the opposite of that person. Right. And does thrive and love that chaos. But when the chaos produces good results for him, and that is Gaza, and we don't have to talk anything about Gaza, civilian casualties, whatever, from Trump's standpoint only. Those hostages got out from him. He flew into Tel Aviv, and they had a picture of him outlined on the beach. Right. And that's the most interesting part of the Melania movie, is that her sitting down with one of the hostage, a woman who was taken hostage, whose husband was still. And that's the only moment where there's any kind of emotion or tenderness. But at the end, it says, the screen goes black and it lists Melania's achievements, none of which I remember, and that was one of them, right?
Well, I just want to say that I do think that, like, Trump has done some interesting and successful things.
Oh, he's not without achievements, that's for sure.
And, one of the things that I think has gotten lost in a lot of this is during the whole Iran-Israel thing, he handled Iran, actually, I think, remarkably effectively, very, very short. Yeah. And I can't believe it wasn't a bigger deal that after the ceasefire was agreed to, Iran had like one lame missile that went late and did no damage. But Netanyahu was like, you know what, we're going to go bomb Tehran right now. Mm-hmm. And Trump got on the phone, yelled at Netanyahu and said, turn your planes around. No, don't do that. Yeah. And that may have happened a lot of times under previous administrations that we didn't know about it. But the fact that, like, an American president was telling the Israeli prime minister to not bomb, sort of Islamic nation that is our long enemy, like protecting them, like, that's pretty stunning.
And then, of course, threatening to do so, like last week. Or
I'm the one that's going to bomb them.
Yeah, it's going to be. But look, I mean, there is something to be said for that. And I'll give. Someone said to me the other day, "You've really been radicalized recently about Trump," because I've been, some of it's awful, some of it's okay. People overstate a lot of it, and I think that there's probably something to that. And I think that the sort of volume of craziness and just the not even caring about, people in the world and, other leaders and NATO, et cetera, you could go down the list. But one of the things I did credit him with, and I think he deserves credit for, is that when in 2013, when the Russians take Crimea, when the little green men who are certainly not in the Donbass are doing that in, when Georgia, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia are invaded and we don't do anything. All of this is, well, what are we going to do? That changed. Right. And the calculation for a lot of leaders changed. Well, what are we going to do when Trump said, yeah, let's go first time. We're going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. There's going to be riots. I don't give a shit. Everybody's promised that I'm going to do it. He did it. Okay. That the hostage stuff. Iran, bombing the Iran nuclear facilities with not even a shot fired against an American plane. Right. No air defenses, getting Maduro, this stuff. Are those smart decisions in the long run? That's a different question.
Well, I mean, it
but
is.
But it projected a strength that I think that changed a lot of international calculations.
Well, 100%. In ways that I think people respect us or fear us a lot more. I also think you have to add the fact that like the tariff strategy, which is very whimsical, has threatened trading alliances with America, with our allies who no longer see us as a reliable outlet. I think and I think so. Yes,
it's one of my biggest problems with him is that.
And the one thing that's come out of this last year is like Trump basically said like, we have the most badass military. The people have no idea how good we are. We got to show off our shit. Let's do the Maduro thing.
Yeah, and they had a device that was going to like stun everyone, and he was like, use the device.
Yeah.
Tell everyone about it. They got a device, and it's like, what the fuck is a device?
Well, we used these growlers that turned off all the electricity.
Yep.
Like we just like did the thing that was like, oh, remember? And you can make a reasonable argument that this gets us back to the military-industrial complex, and we're just selling product, and that's a big part of who we are. So, and then the Greenland thing. Like we can take Greenland if we want. I think the net result with the deal is going to be
exactly what we'd have gotten
if we just made a phone call.
The previous terms.
But your point about like, for all of his bluster, I think privately he's a deal maker. He's a social animal. And, people I know who have spent time with him said he is funny and charming. In fact, a guy who is a public figure who's asked very tough questions to him as part of the press crew tells me that like he was flying back with him on Air Force One and was invited to watch the NFL playoffs years back. And they just sat around and chatted and they were like, having a beer and drinking food and Trump was talking football, and he was not at all the guy who is the performative bluster, sort of Mussolini type.
I met somebody who had dinner with him fairly recently and has been an intense critic of Trump that has very much irritated Trump. And he said, we had a great time. He texted me recently. We have a interesting relationship. The guy's still critical of him. But that personality, that's the thing about Zoran. We had a guy, Tim Waltz, the other day. We had a great conversation, and he has nice things to say about Waltz. He's pissing all over during the campaign, and he has that kind of bifurcated brain that most people can't do. I can't say something horrible to somebody and they're like, "Oh, let's get a drink," and they'd be like, "What?" But Trump is that, and that's the most fascinating thing about his personality is when Zoran comes, and he doesn't say the bare minimum to get a deal done. He praises him. Well, he's like, absolutely slathering him.
Room, you two.
Yeah, and he was like, great guy. He's like, he called me a fascist. Tell him, call me a fascist. He doesn't care because nothing hurts him in that way, which makes a person a psychopath also, is that when no criticism ever has an effect on you. I want to, before we run out of time, I want to talk about Minneapolis and the Preddy situation, the killing of Preddy. There's a second video came out that has provoked a lot of conversation. Now, I think the obvious thing is, weirdly, the White House hasn't come out hard on this.
I think they really know that if they did, it would backfire.
Right, because
it's a tell.
The interaction itself, where Preddy is shot, seems pretty cut and dry to me. I think it's been cut and dry to a lot of people who were insulting towards him and called him, even they have backed off, even Stephen Miller, which was shocking. Tweet is still up, but
stunning.
The second video, I do think is interesting, though. It contextualizes things in a certain way. Yeah. If we describe to the people, it's him spitting on the car, or there's no ice officer there, but spitting on the car, kicking and knocking a taillight off, which was quite a kick to knock the entire taillight off. And then getting tackled, has a gun you can see in the video in his waistband. Really, the ICE officers actually get up pretty quickly and walk away.
They handle it well.
They handle it pretty well. Yeah.
Credit to, that's the bearing the lead there. Not all ICE agents are going to kill people who are. I think it paints a more complete picture of Alex Preddy, who I had written, pretty glowing things about, because the video of the first experience where he was killed, he was a peaceful observer, and people say, well, he was resisting arrest. He was helping a woman who got pushed down, and then he was basically pounced on, and then before he was bear sprayed and attacked and then shot dead. And I think
all in about 8 seconds or something. Yeah.
Maybe 9.
Yeah.
I think the second video paints a clear picture of where his mindset was at. And he was clearly agitated. Did that make him an agitator? Did that make him sort of like part of this, I guess we'll know more details. I honestly think it's immaterial to what happened that cost his life. I think he was effectively murdered. And I am shocked by the eagerness by many to sort of use that second video to sort of dredge up their narrative that was lost in the first round. Because, the interesting thing that going back to Renee Good, the narrative that she was sort of like barreling and trying to kill an officer with her car had been out there for about 4 hours before the video emerged. And that was enough for that narrative to set so that people, when you saw the video, it was a sort of confirmation bias. The Preddy situation, like the video came out much, much quicker. So the Noam Miller sort of domestic terrorist was going to do a massacre. That didn't set because we could see like, wait, that's not at all what happened. Do you show up at that place with a gun? Like he was clearly, protesting against these ICE agents. I don't know that people realize how invasive and occupying the ICE agents are in Minneapolis. Like it's a real crazy developing world, crazy thing. So, the second video showed Alex Preddy to who he is, but I don't think that makes any difference to the way he was treated and killed.
For sure. Does it contextualize for people? And I know that there's everybody that uses every video or piece of evidence for their own sort of confirmation bias, right? And I think that video that came out of him being killed is pretty damn clear. We did an episode of the other show that I do with Peter Moskos, who is a police officer, former Baltimore police officer, then went to Harvard and is now a professor of criminology at John Jay. He consults with police departments, and he was horrified by the whole thing and was like, this is
hour.
Absolute amateur hour, and I cannot believe the way that they handled it, and it shouldn't have been handled that way. He did say, though, it is these people who are actually intervening when people are trying to be apprehended. They're trying to apprehend somebody. We don't know who those people are most of the time. It's not, is it an American citizen who's mistakenly picked up? Is it somebody who's been here for 25 years working very hard? Or is it somebody who's committed a sex crime or something like that? That kind of behavior, which we see in the video that happens afterwards with him kicking the thing off the car. I mean, surprised he didn't get arrested for that, by the way. Yeah. The local police should be there to arrest somebody. I mean, if somebody smashed up my car, I'd want them to be arrested. But the instinct was one of creating confrontation. That didn't happen in the video. That was the one that we saw where his life ended on camera.
Yeah, no,
that didn't happen.
It sounds terrible.
But it is in his mindset in screaming at an armed officer, himself armed, which strikes me as incredibly ill-advised, and attacking the car and getting tackled. Like, that is something I don't know, because there's so many.
Kicking a car is different than attacking an officer. And I think
of course it is. Of course it is. But it does suggest, like, I would never do that. There's a certain level of anger.
It's revealing.
That is
I think
revealing,
it's revealing.
right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fair.
I don't think it's immaterial about him. I think it's immaterial
about the killing. Yeah, that's the point that I'm trying to say. And like I said, it adds layers, and we know more. And, he seemed to be a committed, he seemed to be a legally gun-carrying sort of progressive guy who doesn't, is opposed to federal occupation. And he served vets who were at the most vulnerable time at a VA hospital. Like, that paints a pretty, I think, righteous and profile of someone who cares. I wrote that was like, he's sort of the American that we should all aspire to be. And it was in the context, this was before the second video came out, but I still stand by that because, that's a pretty unique profile that we don't see. Like, the New York Times did a thing that Democrats or progressives in Minnesota are protesting ICE by knitting hats. And then I saw a CNN segment where, like, there's choirs that are going around in song. It's like, guys, this is, you singing and knitting hats is not, makes you feel good. It's a great virtue signal, but that is so ineffective. This is a guy that actually sort of put his money where his mouth was, and he stood up for it. So it's a tragedy. At the end of the day, the fact that, like, we need to draw a clear line around every time the government kills one of its own citizens. And the knee-jerk reaction to create a narrative that makes him somehow to blame when we could all see this video, I think is disgusting. And it really freaked me out, and I went hard against it. And the second video makes it more complicated maybe, but I stand by what
My
I've
worry
said.
about it, in a way, is that, there was a protest. It might have been at the airport. There were all like religious leaders, and it was local police, by the way. It was a local police separating, and they should be there, by the way. They should be separating those people from interfering. Whether or not I think that the person they're taking is a good person, a bad person, there has to be that local cooperation, that local wall, which hasn't happened. I hope that does now, and I hope in those conversations with Waltz and with Jacob
It seems
Fry,
like the ice is thawing. Terrible metaphor,
Yeah,
but like they seem to be more. And
they're not crowd control people. Police are actually trained in that.
But I'm too skeptical to believe the Trump administration narrative that it's the local officials that are to blame. I also don't necessarily believe that the local officials are doing what they could be doing either. I think that there's probably, takes two to tango. I think there's a lot of blame. And I think the way that Waltz and Fry reacted sort of initially after Running Goods, what they said was deeply irresponsible.
Horrible.
So I think, but at the end of the day,
The Anne Frank stuff, I think the Gestapo stuff, all this stuff, I
they're
find
just not ready
I
for
find
prime time.
It's not. It's embarrassing. But the worry is, though, that as the Marxists used to say, and I've said this a couple of times recently, is heightening the contradictions. Right? Is that this was successful in the sense that two people lost their lives. I don't think there's anybody that's celebrating that, but they do see the administration doing something they almost never do, which is walk back slightly with their tail between their legs, slightly, because the numbers are so negative for them.
They lost the narrative battle.
They lost the narrative battle. And if they can create the situation to lose narrative battles in other fields of ICE operations, it doesn't change the fact that people are underqualified. They're being rushed into this with bonuses and little training, and they're acting psychotic. I mean, there's a video that
They're acting like that. They're with impunity. They can do whatever they want.
You say, I will. You saw this video. I'll mention them again. Fire posted this video on their Twitter feed of one of these officers saying,
raise your voice.
I will end your voice.
I'll erase your voice.
I'll erase your voice. I mean, you do not see that.
That's Hungarian.
With police body cam videos.
Yeah.
You don't.
Right.
You just don't.
Right.
It doesn't happen. They're much better trained about that.
Smartphones have changed this whole thing
In
ways that are mostly good, but also video has proven to be, it gives this sort of feel of authenticity. But again, we miscalculate the sort of human condition and confirmation bias that oftentimes video just proves what you want. Like, look at VAR in the Premier League, or like instant review in the NFL. Like, that's pass interference. No, it's not. Like, the team, you see what you want to see that benefits the team you're supporting for. And that's no different from what we're seeing here. And it's, I'll bring back the semiotics. Can really end on a good note.
It is a great analogy that my daughter and I obsessively watch hockey. We're NHL fans. And she's always surprised when there's a call against the Bruins. And I'm like, fair call. She's like, what? No. And I'm like, no, you can't. You got to call it. Like, it's clearly a trip.
Yeah.
Because every time we're like, oh, fuck you. And it was the other way around, of course.
We're getting ripped.
That's
Arsenal has never had a fair yellow card against them. But I'm, because I'm biased. That's the way it works.
And for those of you out there, I like to send you other places than this platform. The Fifth Column just did a great interview with Chuck Klosterman about his new book about football, and we had a long conversation about how technology changes the game. It absolutely applies to politics.
Yep.
And I remember there was somebody, I think it was a guy from Emmanuel Cleaver, I think, from Missouri, who said, the first time I'd heard this, I'm trying to remember, probably the first time it was 2011, 12, said in this crush of Tea Party people that he was called the N-word repeatedly, and it was like a chant or something. And it was at the time, then alive, Andrew Breitbart, who made a point that would hear a million times after, was that if you didn't capture it on a video, it didn't happen.
Right.
And that was a thing that all of these things kind of melted away. And it gave a fairness to a lot of this stuff. And we did find out, which we didn't know at the beginning, that those were Border Patrol agents with Preddy, not ICE agents. And Border Patrol agents do wear body cams. ICE agents do not. The body cams have changed everything. and just watch stuff on YouTube.
It's the panopticon.
Yeah.
Everything's being, and if it's not body cams or smartphones, it's the algorithms that's checking every click that you do. Like we're being tracked and watched all the time. And I think the pernicious effect of all of that will reveal itself over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So maybe these are the good old times. Maybe we're
yeah.
going to look back at this time as a wonderful time.
I was going to say goodbye, but what are you working on now? What's the next thing that's going to come up on Mediaite from you?
We just launched a newsletter that is the newsletter of newsletters, which I'm actually very happy with. If you're in the political media game, there's like 10, 20 newsletters.
Oh, every day, Breaker, this, I just say enough.
So what we do is we read them all, and because most of them are filler.
Oh, wow.
But there's like 1 or 2 good scoops, good analysis. And it goes out every morning at 10 o'clock. It's like $7 a month. And the idea is, and we link out to everyone. We do it fairly, but the Mediaite one sheet.
Pay the $7, although I'm not sure Dan Abrams needs it. Is he still on it?
Yeah.
Okay. He's very successful, that Dan, because you know what? Cop stuff. He did the cop stuff, sold his cop thing for a big...
On Patrol Live,
yeah.
On Reels, top rated show on all of cable.
I know.
It's insane that isn't a bigger news story. And I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this to laud Dan. It pisses me off.
Well, you remember we were doing a whole other show about the backlash that was make believe against cops,
propaganda
after George Floyd and all these things disappeared. And like, we can't do this. And Dan Abrams stayed the course and was richly rewarded for it. So
it's worked out very well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right.
Good stuff.
Colby Hall, thanks for being here. Always appreciate it.
Yeah.
And all of you people in the comments that are mad because it's just us being really hard in the administration. They kind of deserve it now. So just save your comments. I'm not going to read them anyway. So, but for those of you who have nice comments, you can send them directly to me and go over to, I'm not going to read them. Come on, let's be honest. Go over to the Moynihan Report on YouTube. Subscribe there. We'll be back next week. Got stuff, good books. What language am I speaking? I'm like Melania. Start telling Melania now. Tomorrow, next week, we have a lot of parties. Tuesday, 7 o'clock. We'll see you then. Bye.